He waited at the bus stop every day for 7 years, through rain, snow, and burning sun, always in the same spot. But the man he was waiting for would never come back. There was something beautiful about routines. For Stanley Whitaker, they were the quiet thread holding his life together. Every morning, like clockwork, he rose at dawn, drank his single cup of black coffee, scratched behind Rocky's ears, and buttoned up his faded work jacket before stepping out into the morning chill. The town was small, nestled by winding country roads and the silver-gray flow of the river. The streets rarely changed. Neither did Stanley. And Rocky? He was always there, loyal as the sunrise. Rocky wasn't just Stanley's dog. He was his shadow, his confidant, his family. For 10 years, they had been inseparable. Neighbors would watch with quiet smiles as the man and his golden retriever walked together to the old wooden bench at the corner bus stop. It was an unspoken ritual. Stanley would sit. Rocky would settle at his feet, tail sweeping the dusty sidewalk. When the bus pulled up, Stanley always did the same thing. He'd rise, give Rocky a small scratch under the chin, and say with a gentle grin, "Wait here, buddy. I'll be back soon." And Rocky, as if understanding every word, would give a soft wag of his tail and stay seated, watching the bus drive off until it disappeared beyond the hill. Stanley worked part-time as a clerk at the town shipping office. He didn't need much to get by. A small pension covered his basic needs, and the job filled the quiet hours. But Rocky? Rocky filled the quiet spaces in his heart. Every evening, like clockwork, the bus would return, and Stanley would step off with tired feet and a warm smile. Rocky would perk up, tail thumping the ground, and trot up to meet him. Sometimes he carried a stick in his mouth like a prize. Other times, he simply pressed his head against Stanley's knee, as if saying, "You came back. You always come back." To Rocky, Stanley was the whole world. It was a chilly Tuesday morning when things changed. The sky was overcast, clouds hanging heavy like damp wool. Stanley sipped his coffee slower than usual, rubbing the ache in his chest he'd been feeling for weeks, but stubbornly ignoring. He fastened his coat, whistled for Rocky, and together they walked their familiar path to the bus stop. Rocky, ever faithful, sat by the bench as Stanley took his usual seat. "Wait here, buddy. I'll be back soon," Stanley said with a soft chuckle, bending to scratch behind Rocky's ear. Rocky licked Stanley's hand. The bus hissed to a stop. Stanley climbed aboard, giving one last glance at his dog before the doors folded shut. As always, Rocky sat watching, eyes fixed on the road long after the bus had vanished. But this time, Stanley would not return. It happened at the office. A sharp pain in Stanley's chest, his hand clutching at his shirt, breath caught in his throat. Colleagues rushed to his side. Someone shouted for an ambulance. But by the time help arrived, it was too late. Stanley Whitaker, the man with the quiet smile and loyal dog, was gone. News spread quickly in the small town. The regulars at the bus stop heard whispers. The postman shook his head with a heavy sigh. Everyone knew Stanley. But Rocky? Rocky didn't know. He waited. That evening, when the bus pulled up, Rocky's ears perked up, tail giving a hopeful twitch. But there was no Stanley. The next bus came. And the next. Still, Rocky waited. Through dusk and into darkness, he lay by the bench, head resting on his paws, eyes scanning every passing face. The following morning, local shopkeepers noticed Rocky still at his post. "He's waiting for Stanley," murmured Mrs. Perkins, the baker, her voice catching in her throat. Someone set out a bowl of water. Another brought scraps from the deli. Rocky barely touched them. His eyes never left the road. Days turned into weeks. The seasons began to shift, cold winds sweeping through the streets. Rain pelted the bench where Rocky sat, soaking his golden coat. He curled tighter against the chill, but never abandoned his post. Passers-by grew used to the sight. The lonely dog, rain-matted fur clinging to his ribs, eyes always watching the horizon. Even strangers who passed through town felt a tug at their hearts when they saw him. Some tried to coax him away. A kind couple from a neighboring town stopped their car, opened the door, and whistled, hoping to lure him into a warmer, safer place. But Rocky didn't budge. He simply looked at them, then turned back to the road. Waiting. Always waiting. Photographs of Rocky started to circulate online. The loyal dog who waits for his master. Comments poured in from all over. This broke my heart. We don't deserve dogs. Someone adopt him. People came from neighboring towns bringing blankets, food, even toys. Children left drawings beside the bench, pictures of Rocky and Stanley together forever. But Rocky wanted none of it. He wanted one thing, and he was still waiting. As autumn leaves fell and winter crept in, the town quietly rallied around him. A local carpenter built a small wooden shelter beside the bus stop to shield him from the worst of the storms. Volunteers rotated to check on him, making sure he was fed and warm. But through it all, Rocky's gaze rarely shifted. The way he watched the buses, every day, without fail, it felt as though, any moment, Stanley might step off. As if time didn't mean the same thing to him as it did to everyone else. As if hope could stretch on forever. The first winter was the hardest. Rocky braved the bitter cold, huddled beneath the shelter the townspeople had built for him. Snow drifted up around the sides, icing the wooden frame. But still he waited, eyes fixed on the road where the bus appeared each day. People came and went. Buses arrived and left, and Rocky's hope never wavered. But for all the warmth of human kindness, the food, the blankets, the kind words, the truth remained. Stanley never returned, and Rocky never stopped waiting. As spring thawed the ice and green returned to the town, new concerns began to rise. A notice went up on the community board. Stray Animal Control Operations. Scheduled sweep for health and safety. It was routine for towns like this, especially with stray animals increasing in number. For the officials, it was just another line item on a checklist. But for Rocky, it would change everything. The day the van arrived, Rocky was lying in his usual spot, nose resting on his paws, eyes on the road. He didn't notice the uniformed men at first. They approached quietly, two of them, nets and gloves in hand. One carried a tranquilizer dart gun, just in case. "Easy now," one of them murmured, as if Rocky could understand. And maybe he could. Because as they got closer, Rocky's ears perked. He lifted his head, sniffed the air, and instantly tensed. He wasn't a puppy anymore, but instinct still burned sharp in his chest. With a sudden burst of energy, Rocky lunged away from the shelter, sprinting toward the bus stop bench. He ducked beneath it, tail tucked, eyes wild. The men tried to corner him, but Rocky bolted again, weaving between the legs of a growing crowd of townsfolk who had gathered, alarmed by the commotion. "Leave him be," Mrs. Perkins shouted, clutching a bag of dog treats. "He's not hurting anyone." Another man protested, but the officers shook their heads grimly. "We've got our orders." Rocky, panting and trembling, made a dash toward the road, but in a flash, the net came down over him. He thrashed, barked, snapped, but the mesh tangled around his legs, trapping him. The crowd watched in pained silence as Rocky was lifted into the van, his eyes wide with fear, his gaze never leaving the bus stop. Even as the doors slammed shut, his head turned toward the road, as if hoping, even now, that Stanley's bus would come. The van drove away, dust swirling in its wake. For the first time in over a year, the bus stop stood empty. It felt like the heart of the town had been ripped out. The shelter was cleaner than Rocky expected. Metal kennels lined the walls, filled with barking, whining dogs. Volunteers moved between them, refilling bowls and cleaning bedding. Rocky lay curled in his cage, head resting on his paws, ignoring the food placed before him. Days passed, but he ate little. The staff tried to comfort him, offering soft words and gentle touches, but nothing reached him. He was in a strange place, with strange smells, strange sounds, and no familiar bus stop. No Stanley, no hope. The other dogs gradually adjusted. Some barked for attention, others played with toys or napped peacefully. But Rocky remained still, waiting. Weeks later, a young couple visited the shelter. They were kind, gentle people, looking for a dog to complete their family. When they saw Rocky, they were immediately drawn to his golden coat, the wisdom in his tired eyes. "This one," the woman said softly, kneeling by his kennel. Her voice trembled with sympathy. "He looks like he's been through so much." The shelter workers explained Rocky's story, how he had waited at the bus stop for his late owner, how the town had cared for him. The couple's eyes filled with tears. "We'll give him a good home," the man promised. And they did try. They really did. In their cozy house with a fenced yard and a warm bed just for him, Rocky was treated with kindness he hadn't known in months. They fed him the best food. They took him on walks. They let him lie by the fire. But no matter how soft the bed or how loving the voices, Rocky's heart wasn't there. His eyes always drifted to the window. His ears perked at the sound of engines passing by. And in his dreams, he still saw the bus stop, the bench, the road, the place where he had promised to wait. One evening, as spring rain drummed against the roof, the young couple opened the door to carry in groceries. In that brief, fateful moment, Rocky slipped through. Silent as a shadow, he disappeared into the wet streets. By the time they noticed, he was already gone. No one knew how long he ran. Through winding alleys, muddy fields, and empty roads, Rocky pressed on, driven by something deeper than instinct. Exhausted, soaked to the bone, muscles burning, paws raw from the rough pavement, he kept going, guided by memory, guided by love. Until at last, as dawn broke, he reached it. The bus stop, his bench, his place. The townspeople awoke to whispers spreading like wildfire. "He's back! Rocky's back!" They rushed to the corner, tears in their eyes, as they saw the familiar golden figure curled beneath the bench. Older now, thinner, his fur streaked with gray. But it was him. He had found his way home. Mrs. Perkins was the first to kneel beside him, her voice thick with emotion. "You silly, brave boy," she whispered, stroking his damp fur. "You came back." Someone brought fresh water. Someone else laid a blanket beneath the bench. And Rocky? Rocky lifted his head just slightly, eyes heavy with exhaustion, but in them a spark of contentment. He had kept his promise. He had waited. He was still waiting. As days turned to weeks, Rocky resumed his silent vigil. The town embraced him once more, tending to his needs with even more devotion than before. They built him a sturdier shelter right next to the bench. Children left drawings and flowers. Travelers who heard the story made detours just to see the legendary dog who defied time and distance for loyalty. And Rocky? Rocky simply stayed at his post, watching the road as he always had. waiting for a friend who would never return, but never giving up hope. The seasons rolled by like waves upon the shore. Spring faded into summer, summer into autumn, and autumn into the quiet hush of winter once more. Through it all, Rocky remained. He had grown thinner, his coat peppered with white, his movements slower. His once bright eyes, while dulled by age, still carried that unbreakable spark of hope. No longer the young dog who had sprinted alongside his owner to the bus stop, but still, undeniably, the same faithful soul, the same heart, the same promise. The town had embraced him completely by now. Rocky wasn't just a dog anymore, he was a legend. Every morning, someone from town would bring him breakfast, warm scraps from the bakery, a handful of fresh kibble, or cuts of roasted meat from the butcher. Every evening, someone else would make sure he was sheltered and safe for the night. Local school children painted pictures of him in art class. Rocky by the bus stop, Rocky looking toward the road, Rocky with angel wings beneath the words, "Forever Loyal." Tourists came, snapping photos and leaving treats and donations. But Rocky didn't care for cameras or fame. His eyes were always on the horizon, always searching, always waiting. There was a quiet beauty in his stubborn hope, and a deep ache, too. For all their care, the townspeople couldn't fill the space in his heart. They could offer him food, warmth, affection, but they could not bring back the man he had lost. And Rocky, in his silent wisdom, seemed to understand. But still, he waited. Because love, true, unconditional love, doesn't fade with time. It endures, even when there's nothing left to wait for. One particularly cold morning, as frost glazed the ground in silver, Rocky didn't rise to greet the day as he usually did. Mrs. Perkins, now in the habit of visiting him at dawn, approached with her usual thermos of warm broth. "Morning, darling," she called softly. But Rocky remained curled beneath the bench, his head resting on his paws. At first, she thought he was simply sleeping, worn from the winter chill. She knelt beside him, reached out a trembling hand, and felt the stillness. No breath, no rise and fall of his chest. Just a quiet, eternal peace. A lump caught in her throat as tears blurred her vision. "Oh, Rocky," she whispered, voice breaking. The townspeople gathered as the news spread, each face shadowed with sorrow. Some cried openly. Others bowed their heads in silent tribute. Together, they stood at the place where Rocky had kept his watch for all those years, honoring the loyal friend who had never given up, never left his post, never broken his promise. They laid Rocky to rest beneath the very bench where he had waited, wrapping him in a soft blanket, placing flowers and photos by his side. Children drew paw prints in the fresh snow. A local craftsman carved a wooden plaque and fastened it to the bench. In memory of Rocky, the dog who never stopped waiting. Above it, they mounted a small brass figure. Rocky, seated just as he had always been, eyes forever on the road. Travelers passing through the town still pause at the spot, some in quiet reflection, others in tears. And even long after Rocky's final breath, the bus still comes by. Every time it does, it slows just a little, as if to honor the passenger who never arrived. Rocky's story spread far beyond the town. News stations picked it up. Headlines blazed across television screens and social media feeds. The loyal dog who waited 7 years for his master. Rocky's vigil. A town remembers its bravest heart. Messages poured in from around the world. Some shared their own stories of loyalty and love. Others simply wrote, "We'll never forget you, Rocky." Donations from strangers funded a full renovation of the bus stop. They planted flowers around the bench, built a sturdy new shelter, and installed a small fountain nearby. Clean, fresh water, always flowing, for any stray animal who might pass by. The town declared the area a small public memorial, naming it Rocky's Corner. But for the people who had known him, who had watched him through the years, through storm and sun, through sorrow and hope, Rocky was more than a symbol. He was family. And though his watch had ended, the echo of his devotion lingered in every corner of the town, in the smiles of children who learned what loyalty truly meant, in the quiet tears of an old baker leaving scraps by the bench, in the respectful nods of bus drivers who still slowed as they passed Rocky's Corner, and perhaps in the whispers of the wind as it brushed past the bench, carrying with it the memory of a golden dog with an unbreakable heart.